We're recording the interview of Robert Brady. This interview is being conducted by Erica Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the New Media Incubator. It is 1:25 p.m. on June 15th, 2018. Hi, Robert.
Hello, Erica.
How are you?
Pretty good.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
We'll start with some simple stuff. Where and when were you born?
I was born May 17th, 1963 in Dayton, Ohio at Grandview Hospital.
Okay. Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My father is Robert Harrison Brady Senior, Senior, I'm Junior. He was United States Army, then a surveyor for the city, and then went into sales. He's retired Master Sergeant from the Army. My mother was kind of she worked at the hospital as a receptionist, and then she went to being just a homemaker, and then she went into sales herself.
Okay. And do you have any siblings? If so, what are their names and genders? And did they serve?
I have 3 sisters. No, they did not serve. Beverly is the oldest. Both her children served in the Army. Pam is the next one, just over me. None of her kids served. Her ex-husband served in the Army. Well, actually, one ex-husband served in the Army, one ex-husband served in the Navy. And then my little sister Melissa, her husband served in the Army.
Wow, so that's a pretty big military family.
Yes.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was in high school.
Okay.
I graduated early from Middledale High School. I was trying to get into either West Point or Annapolis, but there was a couple courses I didn't have that I needed. I was still 16 when I applied.
Wow.
But they based it on my parents' income. My parents made $1 too much for me to get a grant and not enough for me to get a loan. And so I was a little bummed out. The Marine Corps recruiter seen me and convinced me to join the Marine Corps, July 23rd, 1980.
And so you had to get a waiver? You were 17, 16?
17. I had to get I went downtown again after I graduated, and that's when I ran into the recruiter. And he convinced me that the Marine Corps, and then, of course, recruiters don't always tell the truth. But my mother was reluctant to sign, but she finally did. My mother had been engaged to a man who was in the Marine Corps, went to Korea, and was killed during the Korean War.
Oh, my.
So she wasn't too crazy about me joining the Marine Corps. But we convinced her to sign. I signed. I enlisted. And I ended up at Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay. Is that where you went to basic?
That's where boot camp was, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Parris Island, South Carolina.
And how long was that?
That was 12 weeks.
12 weeks. Is there anything specific that you remember about basic? Any drill instructors?
Let's see. Drill instructor, Staff Sergeant Larry Carson was our senior drill instructor. He stayed in the drill field almost his entire Marine Corps career, was the Sergeant Major of Parris Island, the MCRD Parris Island. He was a Sergeant Major when 9/11 happened. Staff Sergeant Bill White was one of my drill instructors. He had been in Vietnam. He was a little short guy. Really deep voice. He nicknamed me Private Crazy.
Really?
Yeah, because no matter what they did to me, I still smiled at them. There was that, we don't hit Marines or, hit on anybody, but, there was things that happened in the boot camp that just happened.
Okay.
Boot camp hadn't changed any at that time. It was still kind of where they weeded out of 75 originals, only 25 of us graduated.
Over the course of 12 weeks?
Over the course of 12 weeks. We added 23 recycled people. So we graduated a total of 48, but out of the 73 that we all started together, only 25 of us graduated.
So you might have had to been private crazy to make it?
Yeah, might be. At that time, I joined under the combat arms bonus, which meant that certain fields were covered. It was a $2,500 bonus. 17 years old, $2,500 looked like a lot of money. You could still buy a new car then for $2,500.
Wow.
I was in basic training. I had signed up to be an engineer. That's what I wanted to do. But they came through and they said that the combat arms bonus, of course the Iran hostage crisis was on, so the combat arms bonus no longer covered the engineers. So they asked who would transfer over to the infantry. I said I would. I was going to keep my $2,500 bonus. Most of the guys wanted to keep their guaranteed contract. Nobody read the fine print at the bottom of their contract that said, per the needs of the Marine Corps.
Mm-hmm.
So all of us became 03 infantry. Even some didn't get a bonus, they lost their bonus. I got to keep my bonus. Then after that, we graduated. And when I graduated, Staff Sergeant White came and said, one day you'll be in combat. When you get out of combat, come and talk to me. So he'd been in Vietnam, he had been a tunnel rat. And a tunnel rat in Vietnam.
Okay, tunnel rat. Mm-hmm.
And of course, at that time, the Iranian hostage crisis ended by the time I completed all my training. And Ronald Reagan had become the president.
Was there any other training after that, or?
Infantry training school at Camp Lejeune.
And how long was that?
Basically about a 4-week course. I had scored high enough, so I was, instead of being your basic rifleman, I was a mortarman. So I learned how to fire the 81 millimeter and 60 millimeter mortar, the two standards of the Marine Corps Infantry Unit. And I ended up being assigned to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, Bravo Company, with the 60 millimeter mortar section. And I joined them in June of 1981. So,
Are you still at Camp Lejeune then?
yes, Camp Lejeune. Actually, Camp Geiger, which is a part of Camp Lejeune.
So you're saying that you just moved over like
The infantry training school was also in Camp Geiger.
Okay.
And we still had open squad bay type barracks with 8th Marines. And that was my start with 8th Marines, and I was there from June 1981 until June with 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. I was there until June 1984. I was with Bravo Company. We deployed. First deployment was in January of 1982. We were part of Marine Amphibious Ready Group 1-82, BLT 18, 34th Marine Amphibious Unit. On our training exercise, we went to Puerto Rico, then we crossed the Atlantic and entered the Mediterranean. We trained with the Italian Army at Capitolata, Sardinia. Then we went through the Suez Canal.
All this travel was via boat then?
Yes, by
Via
ships.
ship.
We were on a LST, a landing ship tank, which was, we called them the rock and roll animals. A lot of times, especially crossing the Atlantic. I didn't get seasick, a lot of people did. I ate a lot of pork chops on my way across the Atlantic.
Did that help?
It didn't bother me none. It turned other people green.
Okay.
We used to tease people. Like, I'll go upstairs. Yeah, this pork chop's real good. It was like all of a sudden turn green. They go running to the bitch. We did a static display for the Egyptian Army at Port Said.
What's a static display?
And we set up our weapons and our equipment, and the Egyptians could come on board the
Okay.
ship and see all our different equipment. Then we went through the Suez Canal. We've completed that. and a French cruiser had gone through the Straits of Yemen about a month earlier and had been attacked by Yemenis PT boats.
Okay.
So Ronald Reagan decided to show a force. He was going to send the 3 ships of our amphibious ready group through the Straits of Yemen. We improvised machine gun mounts up on the deck. We actually figured out how to mount mortars into the tie-down rings, and that way we could be able to fire the mortars, because nobody wanted to be under the water. The troop compartment was under the water line on a LST, and we were all prepared. And we were shadowed the whole night going through the Straits of Yemen. These Yemenis PT boats. Meanwhile, you know, we knew that there was a aircraft carrier task force not too far away, and they were flying cover for us. But Ronald Reagan decided he wanted to test the Yemenis, and if they attacked us, then he was going to impose the holy wrath of the United States Marine Corps upon him. We made it through the Straits of Yemen, and we stopped in Berber, Somalia on a humanitarian mission. This would have been, I'm thinking, March of 1982. We had docked, the LST docked, we tied to the dock, we went in, treated little kids, vaccinations, things like this. And that night, the ship actually caught fire in the aft control. I happened to be playing cards on the other side of the ship when the drill went down, and we had to abandon ship. So we spent the night in camel poop on the dock, guarded by Somali soldiers with AK-47s. That had been the first time U.S. forces had touched Somali soil since, I think, 1966. They weren't too happy for us being under soil, especially with all our weapons. We weren't happy to be sleeping in camel dung. And we transferred over to the USS Newport LHA-4.
How long before you got the transfer?
The next day.
Oh, okay, very
Yeah,
good.
they ended up having to tow to Newport, USS Newport, LST 1179. They actually had to take it back to the States. It was no longer usable, so everybody that was on the Newport, we transferred to the Nassau, which was like going from a sampan to the Love Boat. Stately quarters, nice mess decks, clean, air conditioning. It was the Love Boat. It had a weight room. It had, you know, instead of being a little closet where you lifted weights, you actually had a whole gym. It was exciting. When we got over there, and that's when I ran into, I didn't know it, a high school, well, actually from grade school all the way. Ran into Earl Guy, who second grade on through school. So he had joined, he was a cook in our unit, and I hadn't seen him prior to that. He had joined in late '81, came over, I think, in October, November. We'd been friends for many years. He ended up going to Trotwood instead of Meadowdale. His parents had moved. So we had lost a little contact after elementary school. But it was good seeing him. We ran in, and then we went from there to Mombasa, Kenya for Liberty. And a lot of people paid $75 to go on a safari to see the animals.
That's a lot of money then.
Yeah. But then we did a training operation with the Kenyan Army, and we got to see the animals without having to go on a safari. It's like, yeah, okay, that was fun. Seen a lot of things. They loved us, we loved them. They liked our sea rations. We had canned rations instead of we hadn't been introduced to MREs yet. We were still eating Vietnam food, which we all liked anyways. After completing our training operation with the Kenyan Army, we returned to the Suez Canal and went to Haifa, Israel. We passed through the Suez Canal into the Med, and went to Haifa, Israel, which was my first time ever being in Israel. I got to do a tour to the Holy Land, Jerusalem. Noticed that Israeli soldiers take their weapons home on leave with them and carry them everywhere they go. So there's a lot of armed people on the streets. While we were there, we would go in and out of Tel Aviv, go from Haifa down to Tel Aviv, and that was where the party time was. And like good Marines and sailors, we engaged in a lot of partying. Then we were asked to leave. We were asked to leave Israel.
Why?
Apparently they were getting ready to invade Lebanon. This would have been somewhere around in April, into April to May. I had gotten a little too drunk and I got rolled basically, lost all my identification, so I became what they call a rivet. That means I didn't get any liberty call. So we went to Athens, Greece next. And since I didn't have my ID card, did we have to stop?
No.
Oh, okay. So I didn't have my ID card, I had to stay on board ship, but I was part of the REACT force. At that time, there was a big political movement. There was Greek communists, there was all kinds of, and somebody started a riot. We're not sure, but we had to go rescue our people ashore. And that's how I got to touch down in Athens, Greece, but instead of in Liberty clothes, I was in full gear, helmet, flak jacket, all that. We went ashore, got our people, and we left from there. And our next stop was Toulon, France. Had a lot of fun there. You know, there's training and then you have fun, Liberty Call, sort of like, you know, not quite like the Army or the Air Force. You actually get to go to different places all at one time. So when we finished our Liberty Call in Toulon, France, which I was able to get off the ship until I got drunk again, and then I became a rivet. Did that a lot.
How long did a rivet normally last? Or did it depend on your action?
It depended on the action, and then of course the punishment that was decided, which they pretty much kept me out of going up for NJP.
What is
Non-judicial punishment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so.
It was like being grounded.
Yeah, it's like being grounded. If we would have been on land, I would have been moving a rock pile from one side of the quadrangle to the other side of the quadrangle with this entrenching tool. So, did a lot of cleaning. And we left Toulon, France in the early part of June 1982. In the middle of the night, they called us up. We changed course, and they briefed us that we were going to probably be going into Lebanon to rescue American citizens trapped in Beirut, Lebanon. We had changed course. We were actually on our way to Rota, Spain, to transfer out of the Mediterranean fleet back to the Atlantic fleet and de-snail and then come home. But instead we were diverted, and the next day was a working party where we were pulling ammunition out of the holds, bringing it up. Everything was getting ready for a possible combat role. And fortunately, our relief unit arrived, which was Marine Amphibious Ready Group 2-82 BLT 28 32nd MAL. They arrived, we turned around, we had the working parties to put everything back where it was, which we got a pretty good workout over that 24-hour period. We went to Rota, Spain, and then we came home. Had leave at the end of June, beginning of July, and our leave was slightly shortened because they started rescuing people. The 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines had started doing patrols off the coast of Lebanon and had already started rescuing people, American citizens. And then 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, we went on air alert. And in August, Reagan sent the Marines in, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, MARG 2-82, landed in Beirut, Lebanon, to evacuate the PLO fighters from Beirut through the port of Beirut. That mission was successful. It was completed. They had to disarm all the PLO. They transferred, I think, it carried them over to Crete. The Marines backloaded onto the ships. We were on air alert, still on air alert, when the news of the Shabria Chatel refugee camp massacres came through.
Oh my.
These were Palestinian refugees that were massacred, some 300 and some women, children, old people. They never really decided who did it, but they're pretty sure the Christian Phalange did it and that they were sponsored by the Israelis. At that point in time, the multinational forces were set up. The first to arrive were, of course, the Marines.
Of course.
The French sent a detachment. They actually had some troops already there. The French increased them with legionnaires, Foreign Legion, and the Italians moved troops in. Shortly after that, the British joined the multinational forces. And we set up basically a perimeter where we kind of maintained control, kept the Israelis from going in. We blocked the Israelis from moving in. Became quite a little joke to where, because a lot of people didn't realize we almost went to war with Israel. They would try to drive their tanks through the positions, and Marines weren't having it. Colonel Johnson actually stopped them with a .45, and that was a big joke in the newspapers at that time. The Israeli tanks had turned around and went back to their commander and said, "Were you stopped by an army, a division? What stopped you? The Israeli army runs from no one." And the Israeli soldier says, "A Marine with a .45. So, we had that little victory, but we were peacekeepers. Primary mission was to keep the peace, make sure nobody else got slaughtered, try to restore order to Beirut and to Lebanon, period. We were neutral and only allied with the other members of the multinational forces. MARG 2-82 was relieved by 3- Marine Amphibious Ready Group 3-83, which was the 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. That was the 2nd unit that went in. And I think they went in December of 1982 and were there, might have been even earlier. They went in, we were no longer on air alert, we were doing amphibious training, which I'd done enough amphibious training I was kind of tired of amphibious training. But our sister battalion, 3-8, went in to relieve 2-8. Every so many months they were relieving the units on a regular rotation. 3-8 was there. They went up into the mountains during a snowstorm, a blizzard, and rescued a bunch of Lebanese civilians that were stranded. There's a lot of other things they did while they were there. Set up hospital care, civilian care, made a lot of improvements. Then they were relieved in February or March of 1983 by 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines, which was Marine Amphibious Ready Group 1-83. And at that time it changed over to the 22nd MAL. So 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines was ashore when we deployed. We left 1st Battalion, 8th Marines boarded our ships May the 11th, 1983. We had completed our training. We were still short personnel to some extent. Corpsmen, we only had one corpsman per platoon as opposed to one corpsman per squad. Some of us had previous medical training. I had been a volunteer EMT from the the town I lived in North Carolina.
When you were a teenager?
No,
Okay.
when I was in the Marine Corps, I was
Okay.
volunteer. And so I got kind of thrown in the mix with extra training, but everybody received first aid training. Did it pretty much. We had already received first aid training. We received a refresher course on first aid training. Prior to our deployment, the Marine Corps issued all of us olive drab t-shirts. We had 5 or 6 t-shirts they gave us. They gave us olive drab towels. We received all brand new weapons, M16s, M60 machine guns. We changed from our M19 60mm World War II mortars to the M224 60mm mortar. We were the first to deploy with that weapon. It was a brand new weapon. And the first thing that come out of Gunny Hernandez's mouth, God rest his soul, was, "Oh shit, we're in deep shit," excuse my language, deep shit. Because that was the first time since Vietnam the Marine Corps had ever done anything like that. So when we deployed, we left Morehead City May the 11th. While we were en route, May the 17th, I celebrated my birthday, and apparently President Reagan, unbeknownst to us, announced to the United States people that we were now assisting the Lebanese government in all efforts, including training their army, which effectively violated the neutral clause. They didn't tell us.
How old were you?
I was 20 years old.
20th birthday.
20th birthday, the end of my 3rd year with 1-8. I knew a lot of people, served with a lot of people, had a lot of friends. We arrived May the 28th off the shore of Beirut, Lebanon, 1983. And a message had been sent to the embassy that before our unit would leave, that 50 of us would be killed. Which was, we had a feeling that things were going to heat up when we were there because they'd already started heating up with 2-6. A patrol had been attacked with hand grenades. Nobody was killed, but there was wounded. The U.S. Embassy had been bombed with a truck bomb and then moved. I think 18 Americans died in that bombing. So we pretty much figured out it was going to heat up, and we still weren't allowed to dig in any better than we were. We're still sleeping in tents when we arrived, with blast walls around them. Bunkers were not anything permanent or really strong. Our headquarters, our entire headquarters element was in one building, including the communications, command control, the S shops, intelligence, the battalion aid station was all in this 4-story building that had been the aviation building at Beirut International Airport. Civilian travel was still able to go past without, they would stop and were searched to a degree in joint positions with the Lebanese army, but no barricades of any kind were set up to keep trucks or anything coming in. Bravo Company we were assigned to the north perimeter. There were 3 main Marine infantry positions. There was the north airport perimeter. Anchored at the top of the hill was Charlie Battery. Then it was Bravo Company on the north perimeter. Alpha Company was on the south perimeter around to the beach area, all the way around the end of the airport. And Charlie Company was first assigned to the university. And then from the university position, there was Combat Post 69 and Combat Post 35, or they just called it CP 35, CP 69, where a reinforced platoon, 2 squads were at Combat Post 69, 1 squad was at Combat Post 35, and 35 set almost halfway between 69 and the university. In our patrols, we would run our patrols, so we'd actually stop through those areas. First day there, Memorial Day was, let's see, we got there on a Sunday. Memorial Day was the 30th, the 29th or 30th. No, we arrived on a Saturday. Yeah, so the 29th was on Sunday. We'd started running familiarization patrols on a regular basis, which I went out on several patrols. Actually seemed like I went out on every patrol. I was the Bravo Company 60 millimeter mortar forward observer. I was also one of the best qualified radio operators. And I always went as like an assistant patrol leader, which I stayed at the back of the patrols. Our patrol strengths were anywhere from 13 to 20, but we weren't supposed to go out with less than 13. The policy was we would insert a magazine in the weapon as we left the perimeter, and the weapon stayed on your shoulder, but no rounds were loaded in the chambers, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to us. At first, patrols were kind of mellow, easy. We had to watch the kids. There were reports of the kids injecting people with different things. We had a whole bunch of wild intelligence reports. Don't accept any food because the food could be poisoned. Watch for people with grenades. Watch for snipers. So we were, every once in a while we would get shot at. If not by one of the militia groups, we would get shot at by the Israelis. Or they would get extremely close to us. So the north end of the airport, we did patrols from there. We were alongside of an open sewer system. It ran behind our position and down the side of it. So basically we all came down with dysentery. Bottom line is we called it Shit River. Like I said, our positions were too well dug in. We started getting tested. They finally let us clear the tall grass and everything in front of our positions. We burned it out, cut it down and burned it out. So basically we had open fields of fire. One night in particular, I was standing guard duty and I could hear movement coming up through Shit River on the side. We popped an illumination round and then it got real quiet. Later, the next day we found tracks out there. We didn't see anybody, but we found tracks out there. So they would do probes, see how good our defenses were. They had penetrated in probably about 50 yards into our positions. We were a Marine rifle company holding what would be considered a 2-company position. We had anywhere from 50 to 60 yards between platoons. So we were spread pretty thin there. July, things really started heating up. I think it was the 20th of July we got shelled for the first time. They fired rockets and artillery at the airport.
Where the main base command was.
Main base command was. There were a couple guys wounded in that attack, but it was the first time we got shelled. And one minute you be eating dinner, and the next some falls in on top of you without warning, really, because the only ones you hear are the ones that miss. Around that same week, apparently some terrorists had hijacked a plane, wanted to land it at Beirut International Airport. The Lebanese government said no to the terrorists, and it was nighttime. Basically, I was returning in if we didn't have guard duty, when all of a sudden fire started coming in at us. 12.7 millimeter 50 cal fire, about 2.5 feet off the ground. The company command post where we were at, we were laced with green and red tracers coming across the ground. Run, slam the deck, rounds go over us. Get up, run some more, grabbed up our weapons and went to our positions. We stayed in our positions for a good 12, 13 hours before they told us to go back. Nobody had opened fire. We weren't even sure where all the fire was coming from. We knew it was coming from the village of Kafirshima in front of us, maybe up on the hilltop. But no, our rules of engagement were to request permission to return fire if fired upon. But we didn't have, they had that added stipulation, and you had a target that was actually shooting at you. It got even more ridiculous, the rules of engagement. Basically, we went from having one hand tied behind our back to having both hands tied behind our back. At the end of July, we rotated positions. Bravo Company moved out to the university positions in 69 and 35. Charlie Company moved up to Alpha Company took over our positions at the north end of the airport. And Charlie Company took up positions at the south. It was a big rotation. We were doing our patrols, and we started noticing more and fewer civilians. We actually started seeing that in July. But different groups would mark their territory. It was like there was the black hand marks. And one of my jobs when I went on patrol was to mark all these places on the map, record new positions, and then we would be debriefed.
So was it like, just for clarification, you would literally see like graffiti of some type, and that told you this has been marked by this particular group?
Right, and we also started to see Ayatollah Khamenei posters everywhere, the Iranian leader that, basically he didn't like Americans. So we started noticing fewer civilians, started seeing more armed militia-age people. I also started noticing a change in even the kids that were there. They started looking at us pretty hard. So each patrol was we actually decided, we had gotten approved already where we were allowed to have jungle slings. Instead of having it to the regular sling harnesses on the M16s, we made it from the front sight post to the back so that the weapon swung upright but facing down so we could quickly bring it to bear. We also started walking with rounds in the chamber and weapon on safe. Because, like I said, things had been heating up. There had been occasional snipings. Noticing the kids, we came around, on one particular patrol, we came around a corner. Keith Schaefer was leading the patrol, and I was back in the back. And the patrol stopped. And I'm listening on the radio, and Schaefer's like, we request permission to open fire. And it was like, the battalion was like, why? We got a kid in a tree with an AK pointed down at us, and he's trying to work it. Has he opened fire on you? No, you do not have permission to return fire unless they open fire. So I make my way up to the front of the patrol, and I'm looking, and this kid could have taken out a good half of the patrol with one burst. Say he was about 13, 14 years old. And he was trying to work that, I don't know what it was. The AK-47 is one of the easiest weapons to operate, but he was having some sort of difficulty. Something had jammed up bad. So after about 15, 20 minutes, he climbed down out of his tree, put his weapon on his shoulder, and walked away. And we continued with the patrol. That let us know right there, though, that, you know, we were going to die. If they started firing at us, we'd have to request permission to fire. And eventually they started slowing down the patrols because we started noticing more and more militia groups moving in. Then August 26th, the Israeli army started pulling back. When they started pulling back, it left a lot of open spaces that were no longer under control. So there was a big fight to control those spaces the Israelis pulled out of.
A fight between?
Different militia groups. You had your three big ones. You had the Shiite Amal, the Druze, and the Christian Phalange. Yeah, the Christian Phalange was the marionette-based Christians, which the politics of it all, I kind of understood. In 1958, we had a peacekeeping mission where they sent like 4 divisions to Lebanon to stop the violence. Apparently, President Eisenhower at that time helped write the Constitution of Lebanon, where only a marionette Christian could be the president, and only a Druze Sunni Muslim could be vice president. Left out the Shiites altogether. So your richest portions were the Sunnis, and the Christians and the Sunni Muslims were the rich people, and the poor people were all the Shiites. Well, West Beirut was mostly made up of Shiites. But the Sunnis, the Druze wanted control too. And then, of course, you had the Lebanese army forces, which we had started training. We shared positions with them. And in some cases, when the fighting broke out, they dropped their weapons and took off. Yeah. We were denied use of some of our own weapons, so we used some of the Lebanese army's weapons. At one point in time, as August, I think it was the 28th, it was the day after my sister's birthday. It was a Sunday, so I think it was August the 28th, 1983. Literally, the shit hit the fan. Well, let me go back, because it was like the week prior to that, a Jeep patrol came up missing. They usually sent out 2 Jeeps with 4 to 6 Marines to do Jeep patrols. Anyways, the Jeep patrol came up missing. And we'd already seen some sporadic fighting going on in the Kafrashima and Ashwafat. So they asked for volunteers. 7 of us volunteered to go on a patrol to look for these guys. Sergeant Jim Wright was the patrol leader. He also carried the M60 machine gun.
M60?
M60 machine gun. Yeah. That was our firepower. He was the patrol leader. I was the radio operator. I also carried an M203 grenade launcher because I knew how to use it.
Because you're the best.
No, wasn't the best. There's a lot of guys better than me, but I knew how to use it. But as far as radio operator, you know, I knew all the codes and everything, was rather quick with the radio, and was able, you know, if I had to, I could call in artillery or mortar fire if we needed it rather easily without having to wait for the patrol leader. Or if the patrol leader got hit, then I could do it. So here, the command and communications section and firepower section was just 2 guys in the group, and there were 5 other guys with us on this patrol, and we started to see car bombs going off. And here I had all these 40mm grenades strapped to my chest, and we're going through and we're looking everywhere, and we're not even taking regular normal patrol routes. We're also trying to skirt militia groups too. And the radio, they finally came over to radio that they found him in a bar somewhere, the Jeep patrol. And apparently they decided to stop off and engage in some of the local liquors, which really upset us, so we made it back to the university. Of course, every time anything exploded out there in the Kaffrishima or Oswego, said after that, my friends would go, "Oh, there goes Brady," because they knew that one round and it probably would have exploded. A lot of grenades on me. And like I said, the Israelis started pulling out the 26th, and they were between the 27th and 28th, they had pulled completely out. Sunday routine was every Sunday they would have a barbecue grill cookout. Had what they called holiday routine. Got to sleep in. If you had guard duty, you still had guard duty or post, man a post. I was on guard duty, but I was one of the stand-ins, relief NCOs. So as we went through, I was dropped off to relieve one guy, and Schaefer went on down to relieve other people, all the way down, because our perimeter was pretty big for the university complex. We were in the library building. We had a moat. It was several stories. We actually had flushing toilets. That was in real water showers. Then we would hear small arms fire. We'd hear the crack and pop. It was like, that's awful close, but it's kind of high. So it didn't phase us at first. Then started catching shell fire. First it was just a couple of mortar rounds, some other light artillery burst within our perimeter. And Gunny Evans was over there by the grill cooking. He said to just calmly put on his helmet and his flak jacket. I was like, Gunny, they're getting kind of close. And he said, yeah, we'll be okay though. And there was this like open area where he was at between the library building and the actual classroom building. And I was over there. So Schaefer comes back up with these guys that he had relieved, and then I was getting ready to go with him. There's 5 of us standing there, and a 122mm Katyusha rocket landed about 6 feet away and didn't explode. And that's when we went on. Everybody went on full alert. They started moving everybody down into the lower levels. Shortly after that, all hell broke loose. We were taking 12-7 fire, small arms fire. At one point, we counted 200 artillery and rockets in a 1,000-meter grid in an hour around us, actually dropping around us. Stuff started coming over the radio that they were getting hit at 69 and 35. They had actually engaged in a firefight for 45 minutes and were damn near out of ammunition. The relief mission they set up, we went out to give them, they weren't allowed to pull out. They had to stay there in that position. We rushed ammo out to them. The Lebanese brought ammo to them. A group of Lebanese Rangers had made their way to 69 crawling through the open sewer system to reinforce. That was the best military unit I'd ever seen in the Lebanese army, because the rest of them weren't worth a damn. The initials for the Lebanese Armed Forces was LAF, so we called them the LAF guys. Sergeant Howe had used, there's a few of us that had trained on recoilless rifles, different varieties of recoilless rifles during a special forces thing. The Marine Corps had 106 recoilless rifles up until like 78, but then they phased them out for the Dragons and the Toes. And Sergeant Howe had experience with the 106. I trained with the 75 and a millimeter recoilless and a 57 millimeter, but the Lebanese Army left their weapons. So Sergeant Howe grabbed that 106 recoilless and fired a couple rounds with it before they started targeting it, and took out a couple of armored personnel carriers that were approaching BDRMs or whatever the heck those things, the wheeled ones the Russians built. Effectively by September the 1st, we were surrounded, cut off by land. Lebanese army had been pushed back. They shut the water off. They shut the power off to the university. That shut the water off. Well, actually just shut the power off, period, and it shut the water flow, period, throughout the whole city. We would get in and out by air, resupplied by air. Had to go out on company laundry detail. We tried to keep it a semblance of normalcy, though reporters weren't really allowed to come up to the front lines. We flew out with the laundry, I think it was Wednesday, and did the laundry overnight on the ship. Fighting was pretty heavy. Helicopter was shot at a few times. On our way back, we were under fire. We flew in by helicopter. They dropped us off at landing zone red, which was on the inland side of the airport. And we laid behind a low sandbag wall for what seemed like hours as we were under fire. And don't know if somebody got the sniper or what, but whoever was shooting at us, they stopped. We were able to get on another helicopter. And literally, these helicopter pilots we had were excellent. We'd actually fly at rooftop height.
Wow. Through
the streets. And you could see holes appearing in the sides of the choppers as we were flying along. All of a sudden, there's ding, ding, ding. And it's like, are we taking fire? Yep, we're taking fire. And the guy up there, he would see somebody up there. He'd sit there, crank up with that 50 cal, and the whole helicopter would shake. You just hear dum, 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 dum. And we heard something about the landing's going to be kind of hot.
Oh my.
The LZ at the university complex was the tennis courts. They'd already dropped off a bunch of ammo and stuff that was actually literally sitting in the middle of the LZ. So the pilot came in, lowered the ramp, and we ran off. And a round past my head, and we were carrying these bags of laundry, so somebody's laundry ended up with holes in it because the round went through Chico's bag he was carrying, laundry bag he was carrying, went through that and slowed down enough to where it hit his flak jacket, his Kevlar flak jacket, and it knocked him down. And hell, I just dropped what I was carrying, and I picked him up, scooped him up, and took him over to the side where we were running to. Everybody else got over there, and we're like, why isn't anybody shooting at these fools? We don't have permission yet. And I kind of went off on the staff sergeant, thought he was crazy. But I gave Chico my weapon. I said, I'll go run back out there and grab yours. So I grabbed his weapon and a couple of bags, carried him back. I noticed that there's all these dragon rounds sitting in the middle of LZ. Sitting there thinking to myself, one of them rounds hits them dragon rounds, they're going to explode. So I ran out there and started grabbing them. That's when they told me to take cover, and then the British had come down with these little four-wheeled armored cars they had. And they were able to grab up all the stuff off the LZ and bring it to where it was safer. And of course I got yelled at, and I was like, I don't care, you know. But there had been a reporter there, news crew. And apparently it was played over here, and Chico was from the Pittsburgh area. And his parents thought he was dead.
Oh.
And he's like, no, I'm alive. You know, when he wrote home, he was alive, but they had thought, you know, they'd seen him on the news until he had wrote home. You know, they were sitting there writing him, talking about, are you okay, and everything. He said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm not dead. That wasn't the first time they had, you know, that was a bad thing with the reporters. And then we rotated out. At the end of that week, we were able to pull second platoon out of 69 and 35, rotating with, I think we put first platoon down there. And things had quieted down for a little bit. Then they rotated second platoon back out there in the 69-35. And then once again, the shit hit the fan. Attack after attack after attack, and finally the militias called a ceasefire to clear their dead and wounded. Prior to that, Sergeant Lopez got shot through the groin area. Douglas got hit in the arm. They called in a medevac. The medevac couldn't land, it was too hot. The Cobra gunships opened fire. One was shot down. I think it crashed, if I remember rightly, it crashed in the water off the shore. The second Cobra was able to turn fire and take out the ZSU that was firing on him. He had taken rounds, and the tail rotor shaft snapped just as he landed on the back of the ship. And so when they called the ceasefire, we was able to carry our wounded out. And at that time, the order came down to evacuate 69 and 35. No more American personnel. The Lebanese Army Special Forces dudes had to stay. There's 40 of them. And they walked. The British had escorted our people out. For some reason, the Lebanese, the militias wouldn't attack the British. Probably because they had Gurkhas. Nobody messed with the Gurkhas. These little guys from Nepal with these curved swords that would chop people up. Yeah, that's, they would threaten the guys, and you know, Coletti let him know with his machine gun he wasn't going to have it. You know, they weren't going to get any of us, but they walked the platoons out. That night, the Lebanese Special Forces guys were overrun and massacred. Once again, we were completely surrounded, completely cut off. And around October the 1st, well, the first beautiful sight was we looked out, and this big old USS New Jersey BB-63 pulled up. To a Marine ashore under fire, that was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. Already, you know, we weren't allowed, our ships were firing in support of the Lebanese army in other places, but they weren't really firing in support of us. We had fired some rounds, indirect fire rounds, mortar rounds, artillery shells, but a lot of times our response was with illumination flares over enemy positions. Letting them know, yeah, we can hit you. Screw that, hit them. They were hitting us hard. What they were telling the people back here was it was spillover fire and stray rounds. The first week of September, we had 2 KIAs and about 30 wounded in action. First 2 KIAs was Lieutenant Losi and Staff Sergeant Ortega. Alpha Company in the positions that we had evacuated, that we had rotated from. We had rotated from the north. They were in the northern positions, to be exact. They were in the position I had been in when they were killed. Took a direct hit. That was September the 1st. Or it might have been August the 31st. A few days later, Pedro Valley and Randy Clark took direct hit. Good friend of mine, Preston Luke, was wounded. There was a bunch of other guys wounded. They carried them with the tracks. And these are people you know, you trained with. Even though they were with another company, you knew everybody. And especially you'd been there long enough. And that hurt. You know, and here we were, our ships were firing in support of the Lebanese army, but not of us. We weren't even allowed to use our own artillery. And when that New Jersey showed up, everything stopped. There was a temporary ceasefire, which we learned really quickly in Lebanon. A ceasefire means anything under 155 millimeter will be used. We rotated out. Alpha Company took over our position at the university. They'd actually opened up a land route. It was a long one. Took us like 6.5 hours by land. Alpha Company had been flowing in to take over our positions. But we had to go by land on these trucks. And we got around and we seen a lot of devastation as we were going through, stuff that hadn't been devastated before. Or at least it had been started to be rebuilt after all the devastation from the Israelis. We made it. We took over the south end of the airport where Charlie Company was. And that was October the 1st, 1983. And by that time, everybody had dug real deep bunkers. We started digging even bigger bunkers. We were all sleeping underground. A lot of the tents that we had originally came and slept in were shredded from bullets. We weren't bathing. Most of the time it wasn't safe to go out and take a shower because they would shoot at us. We still kept the semblance of a dedicated fighting force. There was a little hill that we had a flagpole on, and every morning we'd go out and raise colors, and every evening we would take it down. And we took it down one evening and got to the last fold, and a sniper round went right between us, right through the flag. After that, we folded the flag down. We didn't stay out in the open much. They shot our football. Either he was a damn good sniper or most piss poor shot in the 11s, and just lucky because he didn't hit any of us. And he definitely, used, there was a lieutenant that would make us salute him all the time. He thought he was General Patton. Had this nice butter bar strapped to his flak jacket, shiny. And nobody really liked him. And he made us salute, and then we'd salute him and run like hell. Because we figured a sniper would take him out. Nope. Didn't hit him. Hit our football, not him. It was flying through the air. So we used a sandbag full of dirty laundry after that. When we had time, because a lot of times we would get fired up If it wasn't a sniper, it was a machine gun position. If it wasn't the machine gun position, it was a ZSU would open up on us. And like 23 millimeter shells, you see all the little red dots coming at you, but in between each red dot was 4 that you couldn't see. Mm-hmm. And they would explode on impact. So, you know, it was kind of tricky. You lived in a bunker, underground. Movement was only by necessity. So, October. And this is where it's going to be hard. My best friend was in comm platoon. He was headquartered at the headquarters building, BLT. And we would communicate. So there was going to be some sort of like USO type show that was up there where this little group was playing. And I wanted to go up and see him and a few of my other friends at the headquarters. So I asked permission if I could go on Wednesday. And I think that was 18th of October. We had already lost some more people. The 16th, we lost Captain Oler, Sergeant Swyfert got lost and engaged in a 3.5-hour firefight. So I asked permission on if I could go up to the headquarters that weekend, and it was approved. And then, of course, the lieutenant that nobody liked decided that I had to go on laundry detail. Laundry was scheduled to leave out Friday morning, and we would do laundry overnight. We weren't sure what ship. We never knew what ship we were going to do laundry. It was always a different ship. I said, that's cool, because I could be back Saturday morning and then go up to the BLT and, you know, spend the night up in the headquarters. Everybody calls it a barracks. It was actually kind of everything. Wasn't worried about a hot shower or food because I was going to be on a ship. I was able to do that. So Friday morning we get all the laundry together. I think it was me, Gonzalez, Clark, and I forget, it might have been Young. Rode an armored truck around the backside of the airport, closer to the water, to where they were using, at that time, landing spot Brown, and waited for a helicopter and flew out to the USS Iwo Jima, LPH-2. Famous for the moonshots. Gemini program. Alan Shepard the capsule was brought on board the LPH-2, USS Iwo Jima. John Glenn's, you know, so these were that ship was kind of famous from the old space program. It was a landing helo assault. We get there, we eat, decide to sleep because we're going to be up all night long. Try to catch some sleep. About 10:30, they came through and said the laundry had broke down. We were going to have to stay an extra night. Oh, that kind of ticked me off. So we slept Friday, got up, ate breakfast, hung around on the ship. We got to explore the ship and see the little plaques and all this to the space program. So I'd never been on the ship before. And that night in the hangar bay, they had 2 movies. One was called Blood Beach, something about some sort of worm-like creature that was eating people on the beach. And the other one was James Bond's Octopussy. And watched those, and then got ready to go do laundry. Had fixed the laundry. We finished up about 5:30 in the morning, Sunday, October 23rd, 1983. Decided to try to get some sleep before we caught a helicopter back. Around 6:22, 6:25 in the morning, general quarters was sounded. And they said the BLT was being hit. Now, the thing is the BLT was a battalion landing team, so that included the whole perimeter, but they also called the headquarters building itself the BLT. We were told to stand by for heavy casualties, so the first thing we were thinking that the attack that we'd been waiting for months was finally coming. We already knew there were something like 2,000 Jews, Shiite Mal, Hezbollah, a bunch of other little groups that were really anti-American and were anti-Lebanese government were out there supported with tanks and the Syrian army. We thought they were finally making that final assault. We grabbed our weapons and ran to the hangar bay. Said, the hell with the laundry, we want to go ashore, help our buddies fight. That's when they started bringing in the wounded. Found out in about 30 minutes from one of the guys that came in on the helicopter, one of the crew chiefs said that the battalion headquarters was gone. That had been blown up. When you looked out, you could see a mushroom cloud over the headquarters. When we first looked out, we weren't sure what that was. Suicide truck bomber had gone in. 241 of my friends were killed in an instant. Some 100 others wounded, and I kept looking through the faces for my friends of the wounded, and I helped. I didn't do anything special. I just did what anybody else would do, and I helped with the wounded, and I comforted the wounded, and there was a couple of bodies that were brought on, and one I think was Sergeant Camara. Looked like him. And the other one, I wasn't really sure who it was. But we couldn't really get a positive ID on anybody because nobody had their dog tags on. All day we worked. Some 100 wounded were brought through, treated, stabilized, and then flown on to Crete, and then from there to Germany. Some were taken directly from the Beirut International Airport. Some were taken directly. The helicopter ride to Crete wasn't that far. Wounded were taken all different types of ships. Some were sent to the Eisenhower, but we had managed to secure a helicopter ride in later that day. And we got in, we got a ride to our company headquarters and dropped the laundry off. And then I rode back with the truck guy, me and a couple other people, and started on the search and rescue. I made a promise that I would never disclose what I saw, because I know too many family members might see this and we'd all kind of, so I won't disclose. But I can tell you that most of them were closed caskets. We went about rescue and eventually became a recovery. I found my best friend, Rick. One of the easiest ways was he was wearing my PT shorts with my name on it. And I don't know, everything became a blur. I was there for days, no sleep. We had reporters that were going over and uncovering our dead, wanting to take pictures. And they stopped one of the guys from shooting them. But I told the reporters, if they touch one more of our dead, I'll kill you my damn self. Don't disrespect our dead. Those are Marines. You don't do that. Eventually, I went back to my unit, back on the front lines, and this thing started to wind down because we stopped finding anybody alive the next day. I think it was the last guy we found was early in the morning the next day. I'm not even sure if he made it. It was pretty gruesome. Everybody looked the same, covered in dust. The Air Force started flying in, collecting the bodies. We would put them in body bags in the transfer cases, loaded, taken to Germany. Met some guys from the Air Force just recently that were there, part of that helped work with the identification teams, and they let us know that they took care of our friends good. And one of the questions that finally started hitting me is, why me? I was supposed to have been in there. If I'd been in there, I probably would have been killed too. You know, I couldn't understand why was I so special? I wasn't the only one. There was a lot of us that wondered why, somehow or another we ended up someplace where we weren't there. I looked for Earl. And the wounded. Would ask people if they'd seen him. Turned out, at first he was listed as missing. And then they found him in a Lebanese hospital. He'd been one of the ones carted away to a Lebanese hospital, so Earl was alive. And I was able to let my mom know. First we had a CBS reporter I later found out was Dan Rather. He came to our position and he talked to us. And he said, if any of you guys want me to call your family, let me know. And I gave him so 2 weeks after the bombing, my family finally found out I was still alive.
That had to be a relief.
Yeah. My sister Pam was an asthmatic, and when she found out about the bombing, she had a bad asthma attack. To the point where my parents, she had to sign custody of her kids over to my parents. Or they recommended that my parents take custody of the kids because they didn't think my sister was going to make it. The thought of losing me, almost killed her. And so when they found out I was still alive, and then I was able to call home, and that's when I was allowed to let them know that Earl had been missing, but it had been found. And that information got relayed to Earl's family, but a bunch of other people I knew, John Buckmaster, he had ended up being married to a girl I went to high school with. He was from Dayton, Vandalia. His dad was a deputy sheriff. He was killed in the bombing. Virgil Hamilton from Northridge, he was killed. Bruce Hollingshead, I kind of grew up with him, and my cousins really, from Fairborn, but we'd all play ball together. So, he was killed. 241, and no one could tell us why.
When were you able to leave
Beirut.
that situation?
after about 3 or 4 days, I went back to my unit, and that's when we found out our relief unit, 2-8, had invaded Grenada. They had been diverted, so we were going to be staying a lot longer than they didn't give us a date when we were going to leave. They had already flew in reinforcements. Alpha Company at the university got hit very hard, to the point they were almost overrun. They flew them out. They destroyed anything they couldn't carry in place, and they pulled out of the university. That was our last of our high ground, was gone. Elements of Fox Company 26, Gulf Company 26, and headquarters personnel were flown in from the Air Alert Force. Gulf Company filled in the positions that came in between Charlie Company and Bravo Company, so there was a lot less space between platoons. We had a tighter perimeter. Our battalion aid station had been completely wiped out. We had, other than the corpsmen that were in the line companies, there was, and of course the MAU had its own aid station, Marine Amphibious Unit, because there was the 2 command elements, the Marine Amphibious Unit and then the BLT. But everything, the primary force was the BLT. We had doctors from the ships come out and help too. Members of the ship's crew were involved in, I mean, there was a lot of people involved in rescue recovery. Everybody did what we could. When I got back to the line company, we were still come under frequent attack, either rockets or shells. We'd set up OPLPs, 24-hour listening post, observation post. We'd go out on those. We would do perimeter patrols. Basically, we were running on 15 minutes of sleep a day. We were still shorthanded. I got injured on the 13th of November. They said I could have got evacuated. I said, no, I'm going back. I went back to the line. I wasn't leaving my friends. It wasn't that bad of an injury. It was a puncture wound just below my left knee. At least it wasn't that bad of an injury then. It just kept bleeding. Eventually it stopped. Our relief arrived 18 November 1983. The Marines of 2-8 that had the victory in Grenada, they relieved us. We backloaded on the ships and departed 20th November 1983.
How long was your military career?
10 years, 3 months, 28 days. Nothing exceptional after that. Beirut was probably the worst experience I had the entire time I was in, but I love the guys I served with. There was, we had, as you see the ribbons on our, right here, that's the combat action ribbon, and we all got one that was there. And it was a blessing and at the same time a curse. A lot of people were envious of that combat action ribbon. It was like, gee, I wish I had one of those. No, you don't. Not what we had to go through. There were other people that were jealous of our combat experience. The fact that even within there's a book called The Route, The Marines in Beirut, written by Eric Campbell. He got permission from the Marine Corps to interview all of us. And in the beginning, he says what he discovered was a totally unreported American war that surprised him, usually with that they kept it pretty well blacked out. So much so that even within the Marine Corps, a smaller unit, as small a force as it is, a lot of it was not revealed. so that when you related combat experiences, you were often called a liar. Yeah. And then, of course, you had the idiots that would say you're nothing special just because you have a combat action ribbon. I don't want the medals. Most of anybody that was in Beirut, we didn't care about medals. We did what we had to do.
How was when you returned home, how was your adjustment period?
Well, my wound became infected on our way back. We were on the ship. We were at Rota, Spain when it became infected. Within 10 hours, it went halfway up my back and down both legs.
Oh my.
I had passed out, went unconscious at different times, and then the battalion surgeon they had replaced ours with was green, and he suggested having me flown to Germany to have my leg amputated from just below the knee. A chief petty officer had actually saved my life and mentioned, penicillin IV, start that. And for 14 days I had penicillin IV. But they asked me if I wanted to be flown to Germany. They were going to fly my wife and my family to Germany. And I said, no, I want to stay with my buddies. And I would get home faster that way too. If I was flown to Germany, I'd spend probably 3 months in Germany. Whereas on 14 days on a ship, wasn't very comfortable, especially when they wake you up in the middle of the night by putting ice cold penicillin into your IV, which felt like razor blades when it goes through your veins. Got back, couldn't carry my gear off, walked off the ship, or limped off the ship. By that time I was able to walk. The townspeople of Jacksonville welcomed us with open arms. So that was pretty good. But other than small hometown greetings with men and family, most people didn't know or care. We were peacekeepers. We lost a lot of people. There was a lot of flurry in Washington, D.C. with Ronald Reagan. Years later, stuff started becoming revealed. I went through my stuff and I finally decided to get out of the Marine Corps. I was done. Turns out the primary explosives used in the bombing of our headquarters was some Simtex that the Reagan administration had sold to the Iranians during the Iranian-Iraq war. Yeah, they turned around and used it against us. There was, a matter of blame. They wanted to blame our commanding officer, whereas George Bush, the vice president, come through and sat there and said our defenses were adequate for the mission we were assigned. Our commanding officers wanted to increase our defenses, spread the battalion headquarters out in a wider area so not everybody was in one spot. That was denied. There was it was almost like we were dangling bait. Set a bunch of Marines out there, see if they get killed, and see if the American people are willing to go to war for it.
I'm so sorry.
There's a lot of anger, mixed emotions, and then...
Do you still keep in contact with any of your other...
Yes. Actually, the miracle of the internet and Facebook.
Are you a part of any groups or organizations, veteran organizations?
Beirut Veterans of America, I'm a lifetime member. Disabled veterans, disabled American veterans, the American Legion. I will not join the VFW.
Okay.
When we attempted to join the VFW, I did. They said we weren't in a war. Therefore, we did not qualify. Of course, now the VFW has opened their doors to us and their arms, and...
You'll pass.
I'll pass.
Okay.
That's a polite way of saying I'll pass.
Okay. What are some lessons that you've learned from your military service?
Oh, well, depend. What type of lessons are you talking?
Life lessons. Yeah,
That life is valuable.
that is a big one.
That's one. The other thing of it is this: if it's your time to go, it's your time to go, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But if it's not your time to go, you know, no matter what, you're going to make it. My best friend told me 2 weeks before he was killed that he wasn't coming home. I didn't understand that. Now I understand. Months later, his parents came down for the planting of the Bradford pear trees along Interstate 17 down there in North Carolina. A Bradford pear tree was planted for each man killed in Lebanon. And they pushed me. They wanted to know what their son looked like. And I told them, you remember him as he was. I'll be the only one that'll remember him how he, you know, and I'll carry that to my grave. I won't tell.
Wrapping up our interview, is there anything else that you feel like we haven't discussed or that we need to go over?
Not really. Other than more men died in Lebanon. Eventually, War Powers Act was enacted. And in February 1984, after 18 more men that were killed in action there, one of them a very good friend of mine, whose son was born the day he was killed, they pulled the Marines out. They kept a force and presence off the shore up until August of 1984. But and guys would rotate in and out on the embassy to help increase embassy security, but there was no longer a peacekeeping mission. The French, the same day as our headquarters was hit, the French paratroopers, French headquarters was hit. They lost 58. And when you know, so our brothers, our French brothers in arms also experienced loss. And got to meet some of them. Contact in some of our Italian brothers that were over there. With Facebook, was able to contact them, talk to them. Sometimes I need a little translation thing because my Italian's a little rusty, and so is my French. But
That's okay.
yeah.
Well, I really, really appreciate you telling this story and putting it on film for us so that future generations can come and watch and see. Is there anything that you would like to tell future generations about the military or life?
Well, let's see. The military is a good career. You can learn from it, learn a lot of things. You can learn discipline. You can also learn job skills in the military. Depending on which branch you go into, how much experience you get. Unfortunately, as long as there's bad people out there, we're going to need a military. As far as life goes, respect other people. Love your family. Love your friends. You never know when that moment will come, and you don't want to sit there and say, well, I meant to tell them goodbye. If you have someone close to you, tell them every day, just, several times a day, I love you.
My grandmother would say, give me my flowers while I'm living.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Well, again, thank you so much. I'd like to conclude the interview with Robert Brady.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.